Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I don't believe in fate. I believe in schedules: trash day on Wednesday, oil change every 5,000 miles, rent due on the 1st, Sunday dinner at the in-laws. I believe in the little guardrails that keep a week from slipping off the shoulder. If you press me, I'll admit I believe in coincidence, in the way two unrelated lines cross and pretend they were always headed for each other. I believe that on a Thursday in late April, when the sky came down and the highway disappeared and I took a road I never take. The rain that day felt personal. You know the kind, fat drops that slap the windshield like someone knocking with a fist. The radio said "sell over the valley" in that cheerful Midwestern voice that suggests we all keep calm and carry on hydroplaning. By 4:30, the main route home was a bumper-to-bumper watercolor of brake lights. They'd closed lanes near the river, a jackknifed semi finishing the job the weather started. I could have sat there and inched along with everyone else, gripping the wheel and inventing new grievances, calling Sophie to tell her I'd be late. Instead, I took the exit for Maple Ridge, a name so optimistic it should have guaranteed sunshine. I'd never needed that detour. The navigation only offered it when there was a catastrophe on the interstate, and usually I chose the devil I knew. But the wipers were doing their metronome tantrum, and a pothole had thrown my coffee into the console, and the thought of being another red bead on the highway's rosary made me mean. I veered off. Alternate route selected, the robotic voice chirped, like I was embarking on an adventure and not a wet commute through a part of town I only know from yard sale signs. The two-lane snaked around a hunchback hill and straightened near a string of buildings that couldn't decide if they were still in business. There was a tire shop with a hand-painted banner about deals. That had faded to day. A thrift store advertising designer finds with a mannequin in the window wearing despair in a 90s prom dress. Then a little cafe with a name that tried too hard, the Lark Lantern, whitewashed brick and a tin roof pinging under the rain, a string of lights somebody had forgotten to turn off in daylight. A place the local paper would call cozy and a profile about the woman who bakes the muffins and knows everyone's dog's name. I might not have noticed it at all if not for the car. Many cars look like other cars, that's how cars are now. But a silver CR-V with a bent front plate and a bumper sticker from the museum where Sophie volunteers once a month, those details combine in a way your brain orders like a meal. My brain didn't have an appetite, it discovered it had a mouthful of something it hadn't meant to chew. Sophie's car sat at the curb in front of the cafe, hazard lights silent, wiper blades paused mid-salute, a damp arch of white paper mail stacked on the dash like a forgotten to-do list. I slowed because that's what you do when your heart drops. The rain blurred the windows to watercolor and then a gust smeared it clearer, like the weather couldn't decide whether to help me or spare me. The cafe door swung open and she came out. If you've ever recognized someone from 100 yards without seeing their face, you know what I knew. The rain was still throwing elbows. Sophie did that thing with her hair, the half-shake, half-swipe, like she could convince water it wasn't invited. Her laugh tilted her head back the way it used to at parties when we were both 26 and thought charcuterie was a personality. She didn't hold an umbrella. He did. He. A man in a jacket that didn't deserve the word coat, the casual, competent kind you could wear on a plane and to a bar. He held the umbrella so it covered her more than him. She reached for his forearm while balancing on one foot to step over a puddle, that little trick women learn from heels and men learn to pretend not to watch. He didn't touch her back, he didn't need to. They moved in tandem, not like strangers negotiating space, but like people who'd already mapped each other. I braked without thinking, which is not how you're supposed to do it on wet roads, and a horn behind me reminded me of the world. I turned into the parking lot across from the cafe because I am a man who obeys, and also because my hands found the motion before my mind did. I pulled into a slot facing away and sat there with the engine clicking its little cool-down noises, rain pounding the roof so hard it felt like a conversation I didn't want to have. I didn't crane my neck. I didn't crouch. I didn't take a picture. I let the windshield and the rearview mirror in my memory combine into an ugly certainty. Sophie and the man with the umbrella walked the sidewalk like it was theirs and paused by her car. He said something, I couldn't hear it, obviously, and she smiled with her mouth closed, which is her private smile, the one you only get when you've just said the thing she was about to say before she did. He leaned in to kiss her in that quick, practiced way that means this isn't the first time and you're already late to the next thing. She kissed him back in the way you do when you like your own choices. I didn't sit there to gather proof. I didn't want proof. Proof is for arguments. I wanted the opposite of an argument. I wanted a plan. Not revenge. Not even closure. Just a step that wasn't the wrong one. I put the truck back in drive and eased out of the lot so I didn't have to be an extra in their present tense. My hands were careful on the wheel, as if careful hands could keep life from skidding. The rain let up 2 miles later, the way weather does at the exact moment you're ready to hate it forever. The clouds unbuttoned enough to show a stripe of late sun like a polite apology. I turned off the wipers and they stopped mid-arc, rainwater retreating in a race along the glass. A song came on the radio I usually like, some jangly nostalgia carving a cheerful ditch in the day, and I pressed the off button so hard I felt the skin at my fingertip flatten. Silence didn't help. It was the kind of silence where the car becomes an amplifier for your pulse. Home smelled like Monday night leftovers because we are the kind of people who believe in Tupperware. The lights were off in the kitchen. A mason jar with peonies Sophie had put on the table Sunday leaned drunk in its own water. On the fridge, Clara's senior year calendar screamed with countdowns in thick marker, prom, finals, graduation, whites in the wash. I stood in the doorway looking at her life hanging there and imagined writing on it, "Today, the highway flooded and the marriage did too." I don't know how long I stood like that. Time rubber bands in certain rooms. Eventually, I moved because you have to. I took 2 plates out of the cabinet because that's what my hands know. I opened the fridge and looked at a pan of roasted chicken thighs going toward their decline. I closed the fridge and poured a glass of water and didn't drink it. One of the cats brushed my ankle like an accusation and then forgave me because I opened a can. At 6:10, Sophie came in, a gust of outside under the door, rain on her shoulders gone to stylish damp. "Well," she said, dropping her bag on the bench by the door, "the world tried to kill me." She unwound her scarf like a magician getting rid of evidence. "The highway's a parking lot." "I heard," I said, from the place I'd found in the kitchen that let me see her without reading everything. "You take Maple Ridge?" "Eventually," she said, busy with the mail. I stopped for coffee, if that's what you call whatever that place was selling. Paper beat paper on the counter. Clara texted, "She's at George's finishing their English presentation. She'll be home by 8. "Good," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to my father. I cleared my throat and found my own. "You stayed dry?" She glanced up like I'd asked how the weather was on Mars, then smiled because we had been married 19 years and 1,000 versions of a conversation teach you to find something to hand each other. "More or less," she said. "Umbrellas exist for a reason." We didn't have a fight. We didn't have anything. We had the quiet that arrives when you put your finger over a hose. I moved around the kitchen in patient lines, reheated chicken, steamed green beans like a man on a sitcom about responsible eating. Sophie asked about the bit I'd been working on for a contractor who thought a wine fridge was a personality trait. I asked about the museum board meeting and whether the chair had finally stopped confusing fundraising with begging. We did the thing that had been our thing for so long it no longer had to ask permission. Small talk is a bridge built over a crack you don't look at because it hasn't widened yet. Clara came home with damp hair and righteous outrage about her best friend's inability to use Google Docs. At 17, she has a face that's figuring out what it's going to look like at 30, all courage and second thoughts. She dropped her backpack where backpacks go to trip people and began foraging with the single-mindedness of a bear. "We're still doing Sunday at Nana's?" she asked with a mouthful of chicken I hadn't served her yet. "George's parents are coming too because apparently our families have to be friends now." Sunday dinner at Sophie's parents' house is older than our marriage. It predates Clara. It predates most of the mistakes of our 20s. When the Reynolds, our family friends since back when we thought matching Halloween costumes were wise, moved back from Texas, they got grandfathered in. So did the Schneiders, who bring wine with labels like inside jokes. "Yes," Sophie said. 6:30. "Don't be late. Your grandmother's patience ages in dog years." Clara rolled her eyes with affection, a trick she's perfected. "Can I drive?" she asked, which is a way of asking to feel like an adult without having to stick the landing. "We'll see," I said, which is dad for yes, unless you do something dumb before then. That night, In bed, Sophie read on her side, feet tucked like a child's, and I stared at the ceiling wondering if it would be kinder to end our life as she knew it this second in the dark where you can say terrible things as if someone else brought them, or to wait until daylight where words have gravity. I chose a third option. I did nothing, which is not the same as choosing, despite what cowards tell themselves. Around 2, I got up and sat at the kitchen table and watched the fridge bleed a little light. I made a list on a yellow legal pad because lists are ladders when the ground tilts. It looked absurd: call plumber, leak under sink, tires, Clara, Sunday, Nana, talk to Sophie. I didn't add Detour, café, umbrella, kiss. I didn't add the shape of her smile. On Saturday, the sky returned to a friendlier blue. I mowed the lawn like men mow when they need to be loud without being accused of it. Sophie weeded the bed she planted behind the garage, coneflowers that never stop trying, herbs that pretend they're not weeds. Clara went to a thrift store with Georgia and came back with a denim jacket that looked like it had been through 100 better stories. We moved around one another like cats who know the house is not on fire but also that the smoke detector battery is low. Sunday, we drove to her parents' in 2 cars because Clara wanted to leave early with Georgia to work on their presentation and also because our schedules like pretend independence. Sophie and I took the Camry, the car that thinks it will live forever. She drove, which meant she was in charge of the radio. She sang one of those impossible songs quietly to herself and tapped the steering wheel. I watched her profile and knew I had to say the thing. "Soph," I said, and she lowered the volume without being asked, like the part of us that is still good at each other had put a placemat down for this moment. "I want to tell you something before we go in there and let the Reynolds and your mother make small talk like it's a blood sport." "Okay," she said, eyes on the road. "I took the detour Thursday," I said. "The highway was a mess." "Sure," she said, casual. "Maple Ridge." "The cafe," I said. "On the corner." She didn't look at me. She didn't stiffen. She didn't say what cafe. She said like she'd heard me and put the sound somewhere for later. "I saw your car," I said, and then, "I saw you." The Camry's engine hummed like a neutrality pact. A stoplight moved us forward and then a turn arrow agreed to let us pass. Sophie put on her blinker like a good citizen. "Okay," she said. "I didn't follow you," I said, which was true, and also insufficient. "I know," she said. "You wouldn't." "There was a man," I said. "An umbrella." We were 3 blocks from her parents' street and the Camry could have driven itself the rest of the way on muscle memory. Sophie pulled over instead, across from the little park where kids slide into summer and dogs find each other. She put the car in park but left it running because the air was finally what we needed, at least inside. "His name is Marcus," she said, and the kindness with which she said it made me hate his parents for naming him. "He's on the museum board. He does something with supply chains I pretend to understand." "Okay," I said, because men are taught that okay is a word with many uses, including pretending to be armor. Sophie rested her palm against the steering wheel and looked at the dash like the Camry owed her answers. "I was going to tell you," she said. "I was going to tell you when." She stopped, not because the reason was gone, but because recipes don't matter when the kitchen is on fire. It wasn't meant to be secrets forever. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. It never is. She winced and nodded, like I'd offered her a thing she didn't enjoy but would accept because it was overdue. "I am sorry you saw that the way you did," she said. "You deserved better." "Did I?" I asked softly, a question for us both. She turned, finally, and looked at me, and in her face I saw the woman who sat in the back of my Civic in 2005 and ate drive-through fries because she refused to call it dinner and then married me anyway, the woman who held Clara in the hospital and rolled her eyes at every nurse who tried to turn our room into a seminar, the woman who was good at loving people and bad at leaving things untouched that hurt. "Yes," she said. "You did." "Okay," I said again, because it was the only word that let me breathe. "We don't have to do this tonight," she said. "We can go in there and eat my mother's roast that tastes like a punishment and watch Clara pretend not to watch us and we can not do this." "We do," I said. "We do it with everyone at the table. No hallways. No whispers. Sophie closed her eyes for the briefest second. When she opened them, I watched the muscle in her jaw do that thing that means she's decided to be a grown-up about something. "All right," she said. We pulled up in front of her parents' house, the ranch with the 2-green lawn and the bird bath her father insists the birds love despite no evidence. The Reynolds SUV already sat there, child seats empty, adult seats full of opinions. The Schneider's sedan was crooked, as if even their parking wanted to be a conversation starter. You could see everyone through the front windows because her mother believes in drapes and in keeping them open so the world can see her drapes. Inside, the air smelled like salt and butter and the lemon pledge her mother swears by. People lifted their faces toward us like planets aligning. "You made it," her mother said, as if anyone ever didn't. "The rain, what a week." She launched herself into a hug with Sophie that managed to be both tight and precise, then advanced on me and did that double pat thing on my back that says I love you and also, stand up straight. In the kitchen, the Reynolds kids were making a fort out of bar stools while their parents pretended not to think about insurance. Clara sat at the island with Georgia and a stack of note cards they weren't using. She glanced up at me and smiled, the private kind she reserves for moments when she thinks I look like a person and not just her father. It almost undid me, that tiny mercy. We did the pre-dinner dance. We opened wine and pretended to know something about it. We talked about the river and a new bakery everyone agrees is overpriced. Sophie's father checked the roast with the fanaticism of a man who wants one thing to come out right. Her mother asked the Reynolds about their kitchen remodel in a tone that suggested she might remodel them if their answers displeased her. Clara laughed too loudly at a joke of George's and then looked guilty about joy. I watched Sophie across the room, how she always knows where the corkscrew is in other people's houses, how she leans into women when they complain about men and doesn't defend us or indict us. We sat at the long dining table at 6:42 because her father believes in a schedule even when the roast needs more time. Grace was said by the Reynolds patriarch, who likes to perform gratitude like a theatrical piece and means every word anyway. Plates went around. Butter resisted. The Schneiders told a story about their neighbor's raccoon. I looked at Clara's fork moving in small circles over mashed potatoes and decided to be a person my daughter could recognize later. I tapped my glass the way one does when one is about to give a toast or start a war. Everyone turned with that theatrical annoyance people wear when you interrupt their chewing. "I need to say something," I said, and my voice didn't shake because some part of me refuses to add melodrama to what is already dramatic enough. Sophie's mother smiled with all her teeth. "Andrew has an announcement," she said, to the room and to the script she hoped we were sticking to. "Is it about Clara's graduation? We're so proud." "It's about Thursday," I said. Sophie put her fork down. It made no more noise than any other fork, but the table noticed. Clara took her hand off her water glass. "There was a detour," I said, "because you always start with weather in this family. The highway was closed. I went through Maple Ridge. I passed a café." The Reynolds, bless them, looked like people watching a magician show. You could see them trying to guess what was under the hat. The Schneiders had enough pretend sophistication to go still, which in their world counts as alarm. Sophie's father set his knife down with the care of a man who grew up in a house where loud silverware meant something you had to sleep on the couch for. "I saw Sophie's car," I said. "I saw Sophie." "Okay," her mother said, with such command that the word tried to change meaning. "And you waved and went on your way." "I saw her with someone," I said. "I saw them together." The room is a place we can pretend is solid. It is not. It turned liquid, then gas, then nothing. Sophie's mother made a sound I didn't know a throat could make without breaking. "No," she said, a syllable attempted like a prayer. Her father didn't speak at all. He looked at Sophie the way a man looks at a daughter as if she were a door someone else had slammed in a shared house. Sophie looked at me. She didn't look at them. "His name is Marcus," she said. "He's kind." "This doesn't make it kind. I didn't plan to tell you like this." She did not cry. She does not perform sadness for rooms. The Reynolds collectively inhaled like a choir. Their oldest kid whispered something too loud and was shushed with a hand on his shoulder. The Schneiders blinked theatrically, then tried to stop blinking because it felt like applause. Clara stood up. She didn't stand violently. She didn't push her chair back so hard it scraped. She stood with the steady, small movement of someone stepping out of a casting she didn't audition for. She walked around the table. She didn't look at Sophie. She didn't look at her grandparents. She came to my chair and put her hand on my shoulder. It's not that the gesture surprised me, we are both fluent in each other's hands, but something in the room made the act enormous. My chest did a thing that made me aware of every breath I've ever been allowed. Sophie's mother put her palm over her mouth and moaned. "Clara," she said, on our daughter's name rode 40 years of her own mistakes and a weight she'd waited to hand to someone. Sophie pushed her chair back quietly, more polite than anyone else could be at a table. "I am sorry," she said to her parents and to the Reynolds and to the Schneiders and to a past version of herself. Then to Clara, "I am sorry." Clara didn't speak. She took her hand off my shoulder and threaded her arm through mine, which is a childish, embarrassing thing to do at 17. She did it anyway, because children don't care about dignity when their bodies know where safe is. I stood because my choices are over when my daughter decides something. We left the dining room. Not in a huff. Not with the door slam. We left like people leaving a church before the final hymn because they've realized the sermon was not for them. In the hallway, Sophie caught up to us, not to stop us, but to step into our path just enough to be near. "I'll come by tomorrow morning," she said. "We'll talk alone. Clara, you can come or not. I won't make you." Clara looked at her. Her face was an animal face, the human kind you get when you haven't figured out what to do with your heart and your mouth is tired. "Okay," she said. Then she tugged my arm and we left the house where roast dries out and people pretend salt can save it. On the drive home, the Camry felt like a boat we'd stolen. Clara sat in the passenger seat like someone who was not pretending to be older for once. "You knew," she said, not accusatory. Not flat. A scienced-out hypothesis. I didn't know if she meant I knew Thursday or always. "I found out Thursday," I said. "I told her in the car before dinner I was going to say it at the table." Clara nodded like a judge about to sentence me for audacity. "Good," she said. "That's better than whispers." At home, we didn't turn on any lights. We sat in the living room where the street lamps are enough to make furniture outline itself. The quiet wasn't holy, it was exhausted. The cat came in and took the place between us with the entitlement of a creature who refuses drama. "I texted Georgia," Clara said. "She wanted to come over. I told her no." "Okay," I said. "Do you want me to call Grandma?" "No," she said. Then, after a beat that asked for kindness, "I don't want to be her project tonight." We made tea because that's what the internet says to do for shock. We didn't drink it. We stood at the window and listened to a neighbor's sprinklers click like mechanical crickets. At some point after 10, Sophie's car headlights swept the ceiling and then moved on. She didn't come in. She sent a text, "I'll be at my sister's tonight." "Tomorrow at 10? I typed back, 10. Clara slept in my bed, because beds are more about boundaries when you're older, but they're about warmth when you're small and when you're hurt, and being hurt makes you small. I slept on the couch because I didn't want to be the man who pretended a place beside him still belonged to a person he'd watched kiss someone else. The couch complained. I let it. The dark didn't move. Sometime near 4, I woke to Clara snoring like a truck in miniature and knew I would remember that sound forever. In the morning, I made pancakes badly. Clara ate 2 and left a third torn into moons. Sophie texted from the driveway, "Here." I told Clara she could stay or vanish into her room. She chose to leave the house and walk to the park. She is not a creature who enjoys witnessing. Sophie stood on the porch in jeans and the sweater she always picks when she wants to present competence. She looked slept in around the eyes. We sat at the kitchen table like diplomats who have agreed not to flip it. Sick, mundane things began coming out of our mouths. Schedules. Clara's finals. The dog we'd promised ourselves and never gotten. Then I said, "I need to hear you say it again," and Sophie said, "It wasn't an accident," and we finally had the conversation we were pretending we weren't going to have in 1,000 small avoids. When it was over, she packed a bag. Not definitively, we aren't people who do things with a flourish. She put underwear and skin cream and 2 books in a tote and stood in our bedroom as if waiting for a verdict. I said, I don't know if I want to fix this for you, and she nodded like she'd known that sentence was coming since a Thursday when rain found her hair. She left keys on the hook because you can't leave the hook pointless. She kissed the top of Clara's head on the front step, and Clara didn't flinch and didn't lean in. She allowed the kiss like a queen receiving a subject, then put her earbuds in and looked at the sky. We told the families in awful little paragraphs. Sophie's mother cried like she was good at it, which makes me more suspicious of my own silence than of her performance. Her father called me Andrew over the phone and then son when he ran out of sentences. The Reynolds sent a casserole as if grief is hunger. The Schneiders texted an article about navigating rupture with a heart and the rabbit emoji, because they are incapable of sincerity without garnish. My mother, when I told her, said, "Well, I didn't like Pinterest anyway," which means nothing and made me laugh until I had to pick something to steady me. We saw a therapist. Not together. Not yet. I sat in a room that smelled like expensive candles and said sentences I've been saving for a version of myself that never arrives. I am scared of being the parent who goes stale. I am angry at the part of Sophie that will never stop choosing dangerous rooms. I am worried Clara will learn not to use the word want. The therapist nodded at a rate humans cannot maintain without training and recommended I write things down in a notebook that isn't my phone. I bought a notebook like a new religion. I wrote Detour on the first page and drew a stupid map of the streets I will never need to drive again to know. Clara finished her presentation, graduated with a cap that refused to sit without hairpins, and walked across a stage that might as well have been a bridge. Sophie sat at the other end of the row. We cheered the same volume. We took a picture with Clara in the middle, me with my hand not quite on her shoulder, Sophie with a pride that looked like relief. We all posted different captions that read like we were trying not to correct each other. The summer arrived the way summer arrives, deciding for you. We learned shapes we didn't want. Thursday nights without Sophie's shoes by the door. Quiet mornings with Clara gone to work at the ice cream stand, returning sticky and oversweet. The cat began choosing laps based on guilt. I gave myself jobs at 9 p.m. Cleaning fans, fixing the screen door, sorting the nonsense drawer where birthday candles and rubber bands go to die. When you are suddenly forced to think about a thing you built for 19 years, you find that it holds more screws than you remember inserting. Sometimes I take the long way home. It's not penance. It's witness. I pass the highway where the rain made a choice without consulting us. I do not take Maple Ridge. I take the obvious route. I let the traffic be traffic and the lights be lights. I don't want to believe in fate. I know I don't. But I believe that one decision on a Thursday, exit or stay, changed what room we say grace in, changed which chair our daughter stands up from when a room becomes impossible. I believe we are responsible for our detours even when the sign says main route closed. If you're a person who loves metaphors, the café is convenient. Little place, white brick, string lights in the rain. I drive by it once a month now on purpose, not to punish myself, not to relive a kiss that wasn't mine, but to remember I am a person who can decide to keep the car moving. I pass it and think of peonies with too much water, of roast drying out in rooms where people sit too long because leaving would feel like surrender. I think of umbrellas that cover some people more than others, and of hands that know where to reach without being told. I do not imagine Sophie there. I imagine the road. I imagine myself on it, a man who isn't sure where the week's guardrails have moved to, who keeps both hands on the wheel anyway. On Sundays, Clara sometimes still comes to dinner at her grandparents'. Sometimes she doesn't. She text warns me so I don't walk into an ambush of normal. When she does come, she sits between us like a piece I don't deserve, eating her grandmother's roasted carrots with more gratitude than they merit. When she doesn't, I make pasta too late and eat standing up, one foot tucked against the cabinet, the way I did when I was single, the way I never thought I'd have to relearn. The weather has been kinder lately. The river stayed where it belonged. The highway behaved. But I keep the detour in my pocket like a coin I rub to remember the faces worn off. One choice, a left instead of a wait, a neighborhood you never use because you never had to. These are the places your life sometimes lives when you're not looking. I don't believe in fate. I believe in the roads I take. I believe that somewhere my daughter is deciding to stand up, and somewhere my wife, no, my whatever word we're using now, is deciding who to cover with an umbrella. I believe I can drive home by the route that knows my name, park in a driveway that still fits my truck, and walk into a house where the cat will talk to me about nothing. I can boil water. I can set a plate. I can wait for the door to open or not. I can count the seconds it takes to walk the hall to my bedroom and not hate any version of myself along the way. I used to think Sundays were the safest day of the week. Now I know safety isn't a day and it isn't a room. It's a decision you make when the fork in the road isn't marked. It's a hand on a shoulder and then the letting go. It's a detour you take on purpose. It's arriving at a table and telling the truth in a voice you recognize. It is, sometimes, seeing someone you love under someone else's umbrella and not turning your car around to become a different kind of person. It is, always, finding your way home without pretending the road was dry. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the A.E.N. Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.